Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a monumental career, run it through a stack of sources, articles, research, technical analysis, and deliver you the most crucial insights.
And today, we are immersing ourselves fully in the visionary world of Sir Ridley Scott.
We really are. We're looking at a filmmaker who he's essentially written the blueprint for a contemporary cinematic atmosphere.
That's the perfect word for it, a blueprint. Scott is a true master of creating these incredibly dense, concentrated visual worlds.
Right.
But what makes his achievement so staggering is that he pulls this off across wildly different genres. We're talking claustrophobic sci-fi, neon-soaked neo-noir, sprawling crime dramas, and of course these massive, meticulously researched historical epics.
Absolutely. And the numbers alone, they really confirm his commercial mastery. His films have collectively generated a box office revenue of over $5 billion worldwide.
$5 billion? That's incredible.
It is. It places him firmly among the highest-grossing directors working today. So our mission for this deep dive is to take his decades-long career and just sort of quickly glean the most essential takeaways.
To really pinpoint what shaped him.
Exactly. The key influences, the technical innovations he pushed, and that unique artistic DNA that makes his work instantly recognizable and, frankly, unforgettable.
It's fascinating how he operates, isn't it? He's not just a director. He's a visual historian and a futuristic architect all rolled into one.
Yeah.
He really acts as our guide across time and space. Think about the range. He can take you from the gritty, authentic second-century Rome of Gladiator all the way to the oppressive, rainy, futuristic Los Angeles of Blade Runner.
And then pivot to 12th century Jerusalem.
Exactly, in Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah.
Or the chaos of Mogadishu in Black Hawk Down. This is a career defined by, I think, a relentless technical perfectionism.
For sure.
And crucially, a persistent drive for narrative control. And that drive is so strong that it often results in him releasing multiple, definitive director's cuts of his work.
Just to make sure that his initial vision is preserved.
Precisely.
And his mastery has been recognized at the highest levels. If you look at his early acclaim, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II back in 2003.
For services to the British film industry, right?
That's it. And then just this past year, in 2024, he was appointed a Knight Grand Cross by King Charles III.
Wow.
But beyond the titles, I think the real measure of his cultural longevity lies in preservation. 3 of his most iconic films, Alien, Blade Runner, and Thelma and Louise, are all preserved in the United States National Film Registry.
And that's a huge deal. That's the Library of Congress saying these films are culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Right.
That recognition, especially for a director who is still actively working at this level, it just speaks volumes. It affirms that his visual influence isn't temporary. It has fundamentally altered how we see things, especially science fiction and the portrayal of women in cinema.
Okay, let's unpack this. So, to really understand the genesis of this visual mastermind, we have to look at his origins. He was born in 1937, raised in a military family.
A very regimented one. His father was a colonel in the Royal Engineers.
Yeah, and frequently absent, especially during and after World War II. And this absence created a really unique dynamic at home where everything centered on his mother, Elizabeth.
And this is such a critical detail for understanding his work, isn't it? His mother, Elizabeth, was a miner's daughter, and Scott credits her as his first powerful female role model.
He talks about it all the time.
He does. He explicitly discusses how he respected her toughness, her independence, and the fact that she was, in his words, the boss. She laid down the law.
And that personal experience, that's the source of his lifelong commitment to developing these strong, independent female protagonists.
It's the through line. It explains Ripley in Alien. It explains Thelma and Louise. It informs almost every major creative decision he's made about his leads.
Right. But what really set him on this path of being a world builder was his early exposure to genre fiction.
That initial spark came from literature, specifically the foundational sci-fi novels of H.G. Wells.
And classic films, too, like The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Right. But the definitive moment, the one where he saw the potential for serious epic cinema, was seeing Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey.
That changed everything for him.
It was visually and narratively groundbreaking. Scott looked at that film, and he recalled thinking, once I saw that, I knew what I could do. It wasn't about imitation. It was about recognizing a new, serious form of cinema that matched his own design capabilities.
And that capability brings us to the most enduring element of his foundation, his roots in fine art. He's an alumnus of the Royal College of Art in London.
And unlike so many other directors, He has consistently maintained, and I'm quoting him here, "I use everything I learned every day at art school."
You can see it. His approach to cinematography, blocking, lighting, it's fundamentally that of a painter.
Exactly. When we talk about his unique visual DNA, we are literally talking about techniques learned in art school. For instance, he's a master of chiaroscuro, that extreme contrast of light and shadow you see in Caravaggio paintings.
You see it in the dramatic shadows in Blade Runner, the deep space blackness in Alien.
And we have this phenomenal anecdote that just perfectly illustrates this direct link between his training and his fictional worlds.
The one from Lest Hartlepool.
That's the one.
Yeah.
He earned his diploma there, and the source material highlights the industrial landscape surrounding the college, specifically the vast, sprawling steelworks.
As the direct inspiration for the look of Los Angeles in Blade Runner.
The direct inspiration. He described those mills and the industrial grime as magnificent, beautiful. The darker and more ominous it got, the more interesting it got.
That's the key right there, finding dark, looming beauty in industrial decay.
That's the genesis of his entire neo-noir aesthetic. He didn't just design the future, he photographed it like a Renaissance painting.
That visual focus carried him right into his professional career. After graduating in '63, his first big job was as a trainee set designer with the BBC. He cut his teeth on popular shows like Z-Cars and Out of the Unknown.
And this is where we get that great piece of film trivia. He narrowly missed designing one of the most iconic alien species ever.
The Daleks.
The Daleks. He was originally assigned to design the creatures for the second Doctor Who serial, but a last-minute schedule conflict pulled him off the project.
So in some alternate universe, Ridley Scott's name is on the design for the Daleks.
Can you imagine? Thankfully, perhaps for his own career, that near miss led him away from the BBC and into creating his own commercial powerhouse.
This is the RSA era. In 1968, he and his younger brother, Tony Scott, who became a huge director in his own right, founded Ridley Scott Associates, or RSA.
And the work that came out of RSA in the 70s was just legendary. It became a training ground for so many other talents. But to really get the impact of RSA, you have to look at their advertising work.
Two key examples stand out. The first one is universally recognized in the UK, the 1973 Hovis bread ad.
Bike round.
Bike round, that's it. It shows a boy pushing his bike up that impossibly steep cobbled hill in Shaftesbury, set to Dvořák's New World Symphony.
It's pure, powerful nostalgia. That ad was voted the UK's favorite commercial in a 2006 poll. Think about that. A TV ad with cultural longevity spanning over 3 decades.
It speaks to his visual storytelling, even in 60 seconds. And the second example shows his ability to revitalize a brand.
Chanel No. 5.
Yep. He directed a series of inventive, high production value mini-films for them throughout the 70s and 80s.
The sources say Chanel was starting to look a bit, passé. But Scott's commercials, full of surreal fantasy and this high-art aesthetic, they just completely revitalized the brand.
And it remains a family affair, which says a lot about RSA. 5 members of the Scott family Ridley, his late brother Tony, and his 3 kids, Jake, Luke, and Jordan, are all directors who have worked for the company.
That visual talent clearly runs deep in the family.
So that success in commercials gave him the technical confidence and, I guess, the financial stability to jump into his feature film career.
Which began with a niche but incredibly beautiful debut, The Duelists in 1977.
Shot entirely on location in Europe. Set during the Napoleonic Wars, based on a Joseph Conrad novella.
Right, The Duel.
Yeah.
It chronicles this bitter, extended feud between 2 French hussar officers that just drags on for 15 years.
And while it wasn't a huge commercial hit initially, it was an immediate critical darling. It won Best Debut Film at Cannes.
And it was acclaimed for its visual authenticity. The critics singled out the meticulous, historically accurate portrayal of the uniforms, the military conduct, everything. It established that even in his smaller films, the visual design had to be flawless.
But the shift to global commercial dominance was abrupt.
Very abrupt. The catalyst, as the sources clearly point out, was seeing the phenomena of Star Wars.
He realized the potential for massive effects-driven cinema.
And that realization led him directly to Alien in 1979. And it instantly became this terrifying, visceral, global horror sci-fi success.
The genius of Alien, though, it runs deeper than just the H.R. Geiger creature designs or the claustrophobia of the ship.
It was a crucial narrative decision he made.
He switched the protagonist. Ellen Ripley was originally written as a standard male action hero.
And he cast Sigourney Weaver, which was revolutionary in 1979. Ripley instantly became this enduring cinematic icon. She basically defined the modern female action hero.
And, of course, the chestburster scene.
The sheer cultural shock of that scene cannot be overstated. When we talk about indelible cinematic moments, publications consistently cite that one sequence as one of the most memorable and shocking in history.
It was a smash hit, sixth highest grossing film of 1979. It proved Scott could take his high art background and apply it to something terrifying and commercially explosive.
And that blend of high art, terrifying realism, and philosophical depth, it found its ultimate expression 3 years later in Blade Runner.
But the initial reception to Blade Runner tells a very, very different story than its legacy, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost unbelievable now, given its status. But Blade Runner was a commercial failure when it first came out.
And it got some really harsh criticism.
The formidable Pauline Kael famously eviscerated it, calling it a suspenseless thriller. Someone else even gave it the nickname Blade Crawler because of its slow pace.
And Scott's reaction to that criticism gives us such a crucial insight into his conviction.
He found Kael's review so brutal that he framed it and kept it in his office for 30 years.
As a reminder, he said he did it to remind himself that, quote, there's only one critic that counts, and that's you. And he hasn't read critiques since.
That's conviction. But you have to ask, is there a risk that ignoring all outside criticism leads to insular filmmaking?
That's a great question, because conviction can easily become stubbornness.
But in this case, his conviction was for a deeply personal, fully realized aesthetic that the world just wasn't ready for yet.
It wasn't an aesthetic failure, it was a pacing and marketing failure.
Exactly. And his willingness to weather that and then actively participate in the subsequent director's cuts, which got rid of the studio's happy ending and voiceover, that's what cemented its reputation.
And today, it's rightly regarded as one of the most important sci-fi films ever made. It basically launched the cyberpunk genre.
Scott himself calls it his most complete and personal film.
The reason this film and the Alien franchise still resonates so much isn't just the visuals, it's because Scott is perpetually interrogating these profound philosophical questions about existence, especially through AI.
Yes, we really need to take a proper deep dive into the philosophy here.
In films like Blade Runner, Alien, and later Prometheus and Covenant.
Absolutely. He's not just making cool robots. He's exploring the nature of consciousness through his artificial life forms. The replicants, Ash, David 8.
The scholarship around his work often places this cinematic tension within real-world philosophy and computer science.
It does. His films engage directly with two major opposing concepts. First, Alan Turing's test for AI. If you can't tell if you're talking to a machine or a human, the machine is intelligent.
And second, the Chinese room thought experiment.
That's where it gets complicated. The Chinese room experiment challenges the whole premise of the Turing test. It suggests a computer might manipulate symbols, like translating Chinese, without genuinely understanding the meaning.
So in Scott's world, this translates to the Voight-Kampff test in Blade Runner. Can Deckard tell if the replicant is just performing emotion brilliantly or actually feeling it?
And the scholarly conclusion drawn from this is that simply passing a test of intelligence isn't enough. Any real measure of consciousness must also assess actions and critically moral behavior.
Which is why the final acts of his characters are so important.
Is Roy Batty's decision to save Deckard a calculated move or an act of moral redemption? Is David 8's relentless pursuit of creation a sign of true consciousness or just sophisticated programming? Scott forces you to confront the limits of these tests.
That philosophical density is hidden under such powerful visual spectacle. And speaking of spectacle, he translated that same command into one of the most famous ads in history.
We can't move past the 80s without talking about the 1984 Apple Macintosh commercial.
A true advertising watershed moment. Scott directed it. The budget was enormous for the time, close to $900,000.
And it only aired once nationally during the Super Bowl in '84.
It wasn't just an ad, it was almost like political propaganda for commerce. It's universally considered a masterpiece.
It was modeled on Orwell's 1984. It featured an athlete representing the Macintosh, saving humanity by smashing a screen displaying Big Brother.
Which was a clear provocative shot at IBM.
It perfectly encapsulated Scott's aesthetic. Expensive, anti-establishment, visually profound, and it delivered maximum, unforgettable impact in 60 seconds.
So moving into the 1990s, Scott really needed a hit to show he could pivot away from science fiction, and he got it with what many people see as a masterpiece that completely revived his reputation.
Thelma and Louise in 1991.
What a film. It was a cultural earthquake and a massive critical success.
Starring Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon in career-defining roles. And it was the breakthrough performance for a very young Brad Pitt.
It earned Scott his first Academy Award nomination for Best Director.
And its lasting legacy is its bold, uncompromising exploration of female agency and rebellion. One editor described Scott as the movie's most consistent stealth feminist.
It goes right back to the lessons from his mother. He wasn't just telling a story, he was making a statement.
But despite that immense success, Hollywood careers are rarely a straight line. The sources highlight a significant commercial stumble right after.
1492, Conquest of Paradise in 1992.
It was an expensive box office failure. And that failure led to a noticeable 4-year gap before his next film.
But this period wasn't downtime, it was strategic. During this time, he and his brother Tony formed Scott Free Productions in 1995.
And crucially, they put their money into infrastructure. They bought a controlling interest in the legendary Shepperton Studios that same year.
So they were essentially giving themselves control over the means of production to execute these monumental visions without constant studio interference.
And that investment paid off spectacularly with Gladiator in 2000. It was a monumental, career-redefining hit.
A massive critical and commercial success. It won 5 Oscars, including Best Picture, and got Scott his second nomination for Best Director.
Its impact can't be overstated. It's widely credited with almost single-handedly reviving the entire sword and sandal historical epic genre.
And Gladiator has a fascinating technical footnote that shows his relentless commitment to his vision even when faced with tragedy.
Oliver Reed.
Oliver Reed, who played Proximo, died suddenly during filming. To complete his scenes, Scott's team worked with the mill to create a digital body double of him.
Which was pioneering stuff for the year 2000. This wasn't just a simple head replacement. It involved using existing footage, scanning his face, compositing new dialogue. It was incredibly complex and expensive.
All to ensure the character's narrative arc was honored. And following Gladiator, he maintained this momentum, earning his 3rd Best Director nomination for Black Hawk Down.
A film that also featured a young Tom Hardy in his debut.
And this momentum brings us to a crucial part of his artistic identity, his profound, almost obsessive need for director's cuts.
The fight for narrative control over the final theatrical product.
He frequently recuts his films, and his explanation is straightforward. To give the film added life is really cool. He doesn't want them to just disappear.
And the success of the Blade Runner director's cut really encouraged him to revisit other films, like Legend.
But the clearest, most compelling case study for this is Kingdom of Heaven from 2005.
This film, about the Crusades, it really illustrates the immense pressure a director is under to compromise their vision for runtime and test audiences.
Scott was deeply unhappy with the theatrical version. He blamed himself for listening too closely to nervous studio executives.
He relented when Fox insisted that a massive 45 minutes be cut. And that 45 minutes stripped the film of crucial character motivation and political context.
But when the director's cut was released on DVD, the reaction was transformative. Critics completely reversed their initial negative reviews.
Empire magazine called the extended version an epic and said the added 45 minutes were like pieces missing from a beautiful but incomplete puzzle.
Scott's quote on that experience was definitive. "This is the one that should have gone out."
It confirms that for Scott, the director's cut isn't just an extended version. It is, quite simply, the true version of the film he intended to make. When you really analyze Scott's directing style, the sources consistently highlight his highly concentrated visual style, the striking imagery, and his pioneering use of atmospheric lighting.
A methodology that has profoundly influenced generations of filmmakers. I think James Cameron said Scott has a visceral sense that you're there, that you're present.
Yeah. But despite this monumental visual focus, he is noted as a director who manages to prioritize the human element.
Russell Crowe, his longtime collaborator, said that on a Scott set, the entire focus is on the performers.
Charlize Theron said something similar about Prometheus. She praised his willingness to genuinely listen to cast suggestions on character depth, even late in the process.
And that balance is the key to his large-scale work. When he's dealing with these colossal narratives, he consciously works to prevent his characters from getting swamped by the sheer scale of it all.
He actually models his methodology on the legendary director David Lean.
Right, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago. Lean had this incredible ability to establish the vastness of the landscape while keeping an intimate connection to the characters.
And Scott does that by using these wide shots to establish the overwhelming scale, the dust storms of Rome, the impossible architecture of the future. but then he always snaps back immediately to a tight close-up to ground you in the character's emotional reality.
It ensures the spectacle serves the story, not the other way around.
He also has this incredible reputation for efficiency, partly helped by his claimed eidetic memory.
Which helps him storyboard complex scenes almost instantly. And this efficiency is underpinned by a very specific methodology, the three-camera rule.
The three-camera rule is his secret weapon. His standing method is to use a minimum of 3 cameras simultaneously, sometimes up to 11 for major stunts or chaotic action sequences.
And the reasoning is purely logistical and aesthetic. He can cover multiple angles in one single setup. He can do a couple of takes, ask if everyone's happy, and then immediately move on. It dramatically speeds up production.
Aesthetically, this multiple camera approach contributes directly to the chaotic, documentary-like realism you see in Black Hawk Down or Gladiator.
The story of his professional career, though, runs parallel to a narrative shadowed by immense personal tragedy and a deep family commitment.
His commitment to his family and to memorializing them through his art is deeply poignant. Scott experienced the tragic loss of 2 brothers.
His elder brother, Frank, died of skin cancer in 1980, right as Scott was hitting his international stride.
And later, his younger brother and business partner, Tony Scott, a defining director in his own right, died by suicide in 2012.
And these losses are woven directly into the dedications in his films. He dedicated the director's cut of Blade Runner to his brother Frank.
And he dedicated both The Counselor and Exodus, Gods and Kings, to his brother Tony. He also dedicated Black Hawk Down to his mother, Elizabeth. It reveals the deep personal shadow cast over a career of such massive public acclaim.
Moving into the 2010s, despite having defined 2 of the biggest sci-fi franchises in history, Scott found himself returning to the DNA he helped create.
He directed Prometheus in 2012, which he described as sharing strands of aliens' DNA. He followed that with Alien Covenant in 2017.
And he maintained a crucial influence on the Blade Runner saga, serving as an executive producer on the sequel, Blade Runner 2049.
But the undisputed pinnacle of his late career success came in 2015 with The Martian.
A film that stood apart because of its optimistic, problem-solving tone.
The Martian, with Matt Damon as the stranded astronaut, was an extraordinary phenomenon. It grossed over $630 million worldwide, making it his highest-grossing film to date.
And consistently with his earlier work, it featured another highly prominent heroine, Jessica Chastain, as the mission commander.
In 2017, Scott faced one of the most unprecedented logistical crises in Hollywood history, which speaks volumes about his decisiveness and technical confidence.
The situation with all the money in the world.
Right. Following severe sexual assault allegations against Kevin Spacey, who played J. Paul Getty Sr., Scott made the dramatic, almost impossible decision to completely replace him.
With Christopher Plummer. And reshoot all of his scenes just weeks before the film was due to be delivered.
His reasoning was very straightforward. We cannot let one person's action affect the good work of all these other people.
What's astonishing is the sheer speed and technical mastery involved. He pulled the cast and crew together and executed complex reshoots in just over a month to meet the Christmas release date.
The studio doubted him immensely. They told him, "You'll never do it. God be with you."
But he did it. He used his hyper-efficient multi-camera methodology, secured Christopher Plummer, who delivered an Oscar-nominated performance, and he hit the deadline.
His recent output, particularly in the 2020s, has focused heavily on historical dramas, often with contrasting commercial results.
The Last Duel in 2021, for instance, despite getting positive reviews, unfortunately bombed at the box office.
Grossed only $30 million against a $100 million budget. It shows that even a visionary can't guarantee a hit with complex historical subjects.
However, that same year, he released House of Gucci, a project he'd been attached to since 2006. And most recently, in 2023, we saw Napoleon with Joaquin Phoenix,
which continued his commitment to powerful female figures with Vanessa Kirby's acclaimed portrayal of Empress Josephine.
And it's crucial to remember his output isn't limited to the cinema. He maintains an immense presence in television through Scott Free, overseeing numerous successful series like Number Threes and The Good Wife.
But his first TV directing role in 50 years didn't come until 2020 with the sci-fi series Raised by Wolves.
He initially confessed a deep reluctance to revisit those themes. He said his tendency was to think, I don't want to go down that road of androids again.
But he found the script compelling. The series naturally revolves around androids trying to rebuild and save humankind on a new planet, a perfect synthesis of his core themes.
Looking ahead, Sir Ridley Scott shows absolutely no sign of slowing down at the age of 88. His schedule is packed, We already know about Gladiator II, which was released in 2024.
But even before that film hit theaters, Scott confirmed he was already deep into planning Gladiator III.
He offered a fascinating comparison of the new protagonist's journey to Michael Corleone in The Godfather.
Noting that the ending of the second film would be about a man ending up with a job he didn't want. It's a compelling narrative thread for a director who has often explored the nature of power.
And he has several other confirmed projects in the pipeline.
Yeah.
The Bee Gees biopic, You Should Be Dancing, and The Dog Stars, based on the post-apocalyptic novel.
This is a director in his late 80s who is still outplanning and outworking virtually everyone else in the industry. Hashtag outro intro.
So what does this all mean?
It means that Sir Ridley Scott has created this monumental legacy built on three pillars: visual density, relentless technical perfectionism, and a profound, character-driven narrative scope.
He proved he could pivot between genres seamlessly, from the intimate historical epic of The Duelists to the grand science fiction of Alien and Blade Runner.
He has 3 Oscar nominations for directing, a BAFTA Fellowship for Lifetime Achievement, and he has fundamentally reshaped our expectations for what large-scale, visually articulate cinema can be.
And the sources affirm that his critical influence is vast. In 2007, he was inducted into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame.
More profoundly, a leading German newspaper compared his influence on sci-fi to Hitchcock's influence on thrillers and John Ford's on westerns.
That's a huge comparison.
It places him securely in the pantheon of the definitive genre masters who invented the very visual language we now use.
And despite his career being defined by high-tech science fiction and meticulous historical accuracy, Scott maintains this fascinatingly open perspective on the ultimate mysteries of existence.
He's often described as an atheist, but when asked if he believes in God, he replied with this remarkable tension between science and faith. He raised questions about the Big Bang and evolution.
He wondered if the successful, complex chain of biological accidents could logically be explained by coincidence.
Unless, he posits, there was a controlling decider or mediator in all of that. And this simultaneous pursuit of hard visual science and the unknown organizing force, the question of the creator, whether human, alien, or divine, that's precisely what gives his cinematic worlds their incredible depth and lasting power.
A perfect thought to leave you with. If you want to experience that depth and that organizing, unfiltered vision as he intended, we highly suggest you seek out one of his acclaimed director's cuts.
Like the truly definitive version of Kingdom of Heaven, which fundamentally alters the movie, or the final cut of Blade Runner. That's where Scott's pure, uncompromising vision lives.